German fighter pilots once laughed at the Lancaster, mocking it as a flying barn door, too big, too slow, too easy. But beneath Germany's confidence, fuel shortages, tired crews, and radar gaps threatened their control of the skies. So how did a bomber they dismissed become the sound that meant the Reich's defenses were broken? Here's the real story from inside Germany. In Luftwaffe mess halls and gun emplacements, the Lancaster was a punchline long before it became a problem. German pilots eyed its hulking frame and called it a flying barn door. The joke was that you could hit it with your eyes closed. Night fighter crews laughed about practice shooting. The Lancaster, they said, was so big and slow, it might as well have painted targets on its wings. Flak gunners swapped stories of who would claim the first easy victory. Even official reports described it as clumsy, a lumbering shadow that would never last in real combat. The Kammhuber line, with its radar nets and fighter boxes, was supposed to catch anything the British sent. To the men defending the Reich, the Lancaster looked like a last-ditch gamble by a desperate enemy. Pilots boasted that their Bf-110s and Ju-88s would cut these giants out of the sky before they ever reached a city. Civilians repeated the slogans from radio broadcasts, "The Führer protects you," "The RAF can't touch you." In the early months, every new Lancaster loss seemed to prove the point. The confidence was absolute, almost casual, an entire defense system certain that size meant weakness, that slow meant doomed. No one at the time believed that this barn door would soon force them to rethink everything they thought they knew about air war. The Reich's air defense network stretched from the North Sea to the Alps, a patchwork of radar posts, searchlights, and flak towers. On paper, it looked impenetrable. The Kammhuber line mapped out fighter boxes across the night sky, each one guarded by experienced crews in Bf-110 or Ju-88. But beneath the surface, the system was already straining. Radar coverage left blind spots over forests and river valleys. Veteran pilots, pulled from one crisis to the next, flew on nerves and black coffee. Fuel, once abundant, now trickled in from stockpiles depleted by the Eastern Front. Flak crews patched together guns with salvaged parts. Maintenance teams worked by lantern light, rationing spare barrels and ammunition. One night fighter ace, Oberleutnant Franz Keller, still believed his squadron could stop anything the British sent. He'd flown since the Battle of France, tallying victories, trusting his machine and his training. But even Keller noticed the changes. New faces in his crew, green replacements who froze at the first sign of trouble. The radio chatter grew tense as more bombers slipped through, undetected until the bombs fell. Official bulletins insisted the system was holding, but in the debriefing rooms, doubts crept in. The shield that once felt solid now showed cracks, cracks that widened with every fuel shortage, every missed intercept, every night the searchlights swept empty sky. Confidence gave way to quiet unease, and the sense that something was coming they might not be able to stop. The first real shock came not from the Lancaster's size, but from what it could carry and what it could survive. German technical teams, picking over the wreckage of a downed bomber, found themselves staring at a bomb bay designed for loads the Luftwaffe had never imagined. 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines pushed the Lancaster to speeds above 280 miles per hour, yet it could haul nearly 14,000 pounds of bombs as standard. With modifications, it delivered the 12,000-pound Tallboy and, later, the monstrous 22,000-pound Grand Slam. These were not ordinary weapons. They were designed to shatter concrete, rip open submarine pens, and punch through the deepest bunkers. Suddenly, targets once thought untouchable, bridges, rail yards, oil plants far from the front, were within reach. It wasn't just the payload that unsettled the Luftwaffe. Stories began to circulate of Lancasters limping home with damage that should have sent them spiraling into the ground. The case of ED-588, a 100 squadron aircraft, spread quickly. Attacked over France, it lost an engine to cannon fire, fuel tanks ruptured, hydraulics shot away, fuselage and wings riddled with holes. The crew fought fires, jettisoned bombs, and coaxed the wounded machine back across the channel. Maintenance teams counted over 200 holes in the skin and wings. Yet, after weeks of repair, ED-588 flew again. German pilots who once joked about barn doors now questioned how many shells it would take to bring one down for good. The old confidence began to crack. If this was the enemy's new standard, the war in the air was about to change in ways no one had predicted. May 30th, 1942. The sirens in Cologne wailed as the first wave of bombers crossed the Rhine. Not dozens, over 1,000. The Kammhuber line, built to funnel small groups into the jaws of night fighters, buckled as entire sectors lit up at once. Controllers watched their radar screens fill with returns, each blip a Lancaster or Halifax threading through the darkness. Radio channels, once orderly, dissolved into chaos. Fighter pilots pleaded for vectors, but ground stations struggled to track so many targets at once. Commands overlapped, orders tangled, and in the confusion, many crews found themselves circling empty sky or chasing shadows. On the ground, flak batteries fired blindly into the bomber stream, their shells bursting high above the city. The sheer volume of aircraft overwhelmed the grid system. Himmelbett zones, those carefully mapped fighter boxes, became meaningless as bombers flowed around and between them. Oberleutnant Keller, waiting for an intercept order, heard only static and frantic voices. By the time a few night fighters reached the stream, the bomb doors were already opening. In less than 90 minutes, Cologne suffered what no German city had faced before. More than 1,400 tons of bombs dropped in a single night. Fires raged from the cathedral to the industrial quarter. For the first time, civilians saw entire districts vanish before dawn. The old confidence, trust in the net, faith in the grid, collapsed with the city's skyline. The bomber stream had slipped through, and the Kammhuber line's promise of protection was exposed as an illusion. A mother clutches her daughter in the cellar as the world above turns to flame. The sound of 4 engines grows, then the ceiling shakes, dust sifting from the cracks. Outside, the night is alive with wind hotter than any summer, pulling air from the lungs of those trapped below. Police logs from Hamburg record desperate calls, families suffocating, children gasping for breath, entire blocks unreachable. Letters found decades later describe the air turning thick and black, the sirens drowned by the roar of fire. In less than a week, 37,000 people die, some from the bombs, more from the heat and smoke. Survivors speak of hurricane winds, doors torn from hinges, the city's heart pulled apart. For those who lived, the memory is not of bombs, but of a night that burned louder than the guns, and a fear that never left. Desperation swept through German command as the old defenses failed. Engineers rushed out Schräge Musik, upward-firing cannons mounted in Bf-110 and Ju-88s, hoping to catch Lancasters from below, where their gunners couldn't see. Flak belts thickened around cities, layer upon layer of 88 and 105mm guns, burning through precious ammunition and fuel. Radar operators tried to herd fighters into the streams, but the sky was chaos. Orders turned brutal. Sonderkommando Elbe pilots, many barely trained, were told to ram bombers if their guns jammed. Some flew with explosives packed behind their seats. Field reports describe pilots climbing into cockpits knowing they were being sent to DIE. For every Lancaster brought down, too many German crews vanished. The defense no longer felt like a shield, just sacrifice, and the bombers kept coming. In July 1943, over 37,000 civilians died in Hamburg during Operation Gomorrah, many from fire and suffocation as Lancaster bombers delivered devastation on a scale Germany had never faced. German air defense records show that early claims of easy victories gave way to desperate innovations like upward-firing cannons and ramming attacks. Despite these efforts, the Luftwaffe lost irreplaceable pilots and resources, while the Lancaster kept coming. Yet, many wartime German documents on civilian morale and air defense remain classified or incomplete, leaving parts of the psychological impact unrecorded. Today, historians agree that the Lancaster shifted the meaning of air power, from isolated raids to the systematic destruction of cities and infrastructure. The evidence is clear. What began as a target of mockery became a symbol of defeat. The sound of the Lancaster's engines, once dismissed, marked the end of German certainty in the skies.